Have you ever stood before a complete stranger, just a brief exchange of glances, and somehow your body already knew the answer long before the mind could speak? A silent current passes over your skin as if you found something more familiar than your own name. It isn't love at first sight, it's an echo whispered from the deep wells of the unconscious. From a young age, we are taught to reason, to make lists, to analyze. But Jung reminds us the true compass of love does not live in the head, but in the gut, in the chest, in the gentle exhale when we find someone who feels like home. This is not mere chemistry, it is the ancient language of the body and the collective unconscious. Have you ever been near someone, no clear reason why, and your body tightens, breath shortens, shoulders tense, or perhaps the opposite, a person far from your ideal type, yet their presence softens the world inside you? These reactions are not mysteries. They are maps Jung left for those brave enough to journey into the wild terrain of real love, path that begins not in logic but in somatic intuition. And if you've ever felt torn between passion and peace, between obsession and authenticity, you are not alone. This confusion isn't a flaw in your character, it is the very terrain of the soul's evolution. So now let us begin the descent not into fantasy, but into the fine trembling signals of the body, signals that distinguish between the call of true love and the haunting whispers of a shadow yet unhealed. Recall the last time you met someone who made you feel an inexplicable sense of closeness. It wasn't because they looked like someone you used to love. It wasn't their words, their gaze, or any remarkable gesture. It was something in your body, perhaps a soft release in your shoulders, a deep breath you didn't plan, a sensation as if you had just stepped across the threshold and found your way home. Carl Jung called this a sign of deep resonance, an ancient language no school teaches, yet your body knows it as intimately as the instinct to survive. And here's the tragedy: most of us, so trained to trust the intellect, have forgotten how to listen to this ancient tongue. You may have been with someone who checked every box, someone who fit your ideal in every way. And yet within mere minutes, your body felt drained, breathless, as though it was performing a role it never agreed to. Jung called this a conflict between ego and the unconscious, a place where your body resists a connection your mind insists is right. Then there are those who don't fit any list, who aren't especially charming or witty, and yet their presence quiets you. Around them you stop striving. Your body whispers, "I am safe here." Your nervous system ceases its hidden battle. The tension melts. The invisible effort to be lovable disappears. This, Jung said, is the soul's synchronicity. It exists not in words but in the cells. You see, the body does not lie. It has one task: to respond to truth. It does not care about your logic. It only wants your wholeness. But tragically, we've been taught to ignore it. We call anxiety just work stress, and the weight in our chest just not ready to love. And in doing so, we silence a sacred compass. Jung once said, "Do not confuse what excites you with what heals you." Many mistake the trembling hands, racing heart, and sleepless nights for true love. But often these are not soul whispers. They are survival memories. The shadow has been triggered, and what you feel is not love, but an old wound waking up, crying out to be healed, not repeated. That intense longing you feel. Sometimes it's not your soul recognizing its twin flame, but your childhood loneliness reactivated by someone who unconsciously mirrors the one who hurt you. Jung called this projection, where you cast your unhealed parts onto another, mistaking them as the one when in truth they're merely a mirror calling you inward. Each gesture, each bodily reaction is a map. The question is, do you have the courage to read it? Or will you keep choosing relationships that feel like endurance tests, thinking love must always cost you something? Jung would disagree. He believed real love doesn't erode you, it frees you. Frees you from performance. Frees you from self-editing. Frees you from ancient patterns that draw you back to those who harm. And here's the miracle: your body already knows all this. You simply need to relearn how to listen. If you've ever felt like you're acting in your own relationship, or find yourself holding your breath next to someone you claim to love, please know you are not alone. Thousands are awakening slowly, learning to recognize the true signs of a healthy connection, not by the fireworks, but by the peace. I invite you to join our community, a sanctuary for souls returning to truth. A place to share your story, to hear others, and to remember who you really are. Feel free to share your experience in the comments. I and others walking this path will be there to listen. And in the next part, we'll dive into something crucial: how to tell the difference between attraction from the shadow and resonance from the soul. This is the key to avoiding energy-draining relationships and opening the door to love that is not just right for your heart, but for your whole being. Stay with me. The most important truth is yet to come. There is a painful paradox in love. We are often most drawn not to those who can heal us, but to those who reawaken our wounds. And ironically, we call that destiny. Jung saw this clearly. He named it the projection of the shadow, where we fall for someone not for who they are, but for what they awaken within us. When you feel restless, sleepless, or emotionally unhinged around someone, it may not be love you're experiencing. It may be an old wound resurfacing in disguise. It's not love, it's pain wearing a mask. Think back. Have you ever been with someone who made you feel like you were never enough? They didn't need to say it, but next to them, you constantly felt the urge to prove your worth, to be prettier, smarter, less sensitive, hoping one day you'd finally be enough to be fully loved. Jung would whisper gently, "You are not in love with them. You're trying to fix something unfinished in your childhood." You see, these emotional storms don't come from the present. They are echoes from your past. That person is merely the key, but the lock lies deep within your unconscious. And until you return and face that shadow, you will continue to repeat the same pattern with different faces. A distant mother, a critical father, a first love who made you feel dispensable. Together they form your emotional blueprint, and every time someone arrives with a similar frequency, your nervous system can't tell illusion from truth. It only says, "This feels familiar. Hold on." And so you mistake the familiarity of pain for the connection of the soul. How do we tell the difference? How do we know who pulls us back into old wounds and who gently walks us toward healing? Jung said, observe how you feel after you part way, not just when you first meet. If after spending time with them you feel empty, disoriented, lost, it's likely your shadow has taken over. But if you feel deeper, calmer, more connected to your true self, you've touched something real. Let me offer you something simple. You go on a date with someone who leaves you breathless from the first moment. Sparks fly. The conversation is electric. Their gaze is intense. It feels like you've met in another lifetime. But within weeks, you feel off balance. You laugh less. You wait for their messages. You question yourself every night. What you're caught in is not love. It's a trauma-bonded connection built not on truth, but on unresolved pain. Now contrast that with someone else. No fireworks, no cinematic moments. But after each meeting, you sleep better. You speak more openly. You feel no need to edit yourself. You feel safe. That is what Jung called the landscape of the soul, where no strategy is needed, only presence. If you're beginning to notice this pattern in your own life, know this: you are not alone. Many are awakening from addictive love and learning to discern the difference between shadow and light. I invite you to become part of our growing community around these videos, a space where it is safe to speak the truths you've never dared say aloud. Leave a comment below how I mistook my shadow for love, or simply am learning to listen to my body. When you write it, you're not just sharing, you're beginning to heal. And in the next part, go deeper into how to clearly distinguish a person who triggers trauma from one who awakens your soul, not just through emotion, but through physical signs, nervous system responses, and daily behaviors. You will learn why you can't sleep or eat well around the wrong person, and why the right person makes you want to journal, exercise, and call your mother. Stay with me. What's coming next may be the very light you need to realize what you've been searching for has been within you all along. The strangest thing about love is not found in its wild sparks, but in the quiet of wordless moments. Jung once said, a real relationship is where the ego no longer needs to shout to be heard, because the soul is finally allowed to whisper. And indeed, the right person won't leave you breathless from passion. They will help you breathe deeper, because you're allowed to be yourself. In a world overwhelmed by emotional noise, how can we recognize true connection? Let's begin with something simple yet powerful. Your body does not lie. Picture an ordinary Sunday morning. You've just woken up and your phone rings. It's them. What is your first sensation? Do you feel excited or like you need to mentally prepare? Do you want to be honest, or do you start choosing your words carefully to avoid upsetting them? Does your body feel light, or is there a tightness in your neck and shoulders that you can quite explain? These are the subtle indicators Jung often spoke about Messages from your nervous system arriving long before your conscious mind can rationalize anything. A healthy relationship doesn't make your mind busy, it brings your body into presence. You begin to notice you breathe deeper, you sleep better. You don't need to explain every part of yourself because they can hear even what you don't say. Take Jamie, for example, a 34-year-old woman who once dated a man who was by all accounts perfect on paper, stable, attentive, shared her hobbies. But after 3 months, she noticed a strange pattern. Her stomach would ache before each date. Nothing overtly wrong had happened, but her body knew. Friends told her not to overreact, but Jamie chose to listen. And the moment she ended the relationship, those pains vanished. She realized just because something looks right doesn't mean it feels aligned. True compatibility isn't just about shared interests, it's about coherence between soul and soma. We must relearn the language of stillness, where the right person doesn't awaken your animal instincts, but helps you access the deeper, quieter truth within. Jung said the one meant for you won't send you chasing after them in panic. They'll guide you inward in peace. So what are the body-based signs you can trust? Your digestion stabilizes, you eat well. No bloating or stomach tension. Your breath slows. Conversations flow and your throat stays open. Your sleep deepens, you rest easier. Dream less chaotically, feel more whole. You stop performing, you dress comfortably, skip the script and speak freely. Your mind is clear, you're not lost in anxious questions like, do they still like me or did I say too much? These are not wishful thinking. They are physiological signals from your parasympathetic nervous system, your body telling you it feels safe. And when you meet someone who awakens that, something beautiful begins to unfold. You feel inspired to create. You start caring for your body not to impress, but because your worth feels activated. You want to write, meditate, move not because they ask, but because your soul is finally breathing. A true relationship doesn't complete you, it reflects what's already whole inside you, what you've simply forgotten. If you're starting to see this unfold in your own journey, I invite you to pause and ask, lately, how does my body feel when I'm with this person? Share in the comments below even a single sentence like I used to think anxiety was love, but now I know love feels like peace. You'll be surprised how many others are on the same path. We're learning how to love, not through fear, but through full presence. And in the next part, we'll step into a crucial threshold. What happens when you finally meet the right person, but your shadow fights back? Because strangely, when the soul begins to heal, the ego often panics. You may want to withdraw. You may feel unworthy. You may whisper to yourself, this is too good to be true. Jung called this the resistance of the ego. And if you don't understand it, you may walk away from the best thing that ever happened to you, mistaking it for danger. Stay tuned. In the next part, we'll explore how to move through that chaos so that when true love knocks you open the door, instead of running from your own healing. True love, the kind that doesn't arise from fleeting desire or prolonged loneliness, carries within it a strange paradox. When it finally arrives, the deepest part of you might want to run. Jung called this the ego's rebellion against the light of the soul. Not because the love is wrong, but because its very rightness threatens the survival structures your ego has spent years building. Real love doesn't just stir your heart, it awakens your shadow. And as a self-protective reflex, you begin to feel unworthy. You start to question, do they really love me? Am I good enough to keep them? Is this some kind of cosmic joke? Imagine a man named Michael. After years of failed relationships, he meets a woman who is gentle, present, and asks for nothing. For the first time, he doesn't need to perform. He doesn't need to impress. He doesn't need to play the role of the perfect man. But strangely, just a few months and Michael begins to withdraw. He delays replies. He says he's busy. He tells her he needs space. Not because she's done anything wrong, but because the love she offers is so calm, so safe that it disorients him. Peace feels suspicious. Jung would say Michael isn't avoiding her. He's avoiding the part of himself that hasn't yet been healed. Most of us are addicted to what Jung might call chemical paint-rama bonds, dressed as passion. We've grown used to relationships that spike adrenaline and dopamine. A text is a dopamine hit. Being ignored is an emotional crash. Our nervous systems mistake emotional chaos for spiritual connection. So, when someone comes along who soothes your nervous system, who feels safe, you might interpret that as boring or missing chemistry. But what you're actually feeling is healing. Healing you may not yet be ready to receive. You see, real love isn't like the movies. It's not fireworks and dramatic music. It's more like morning sunlight, soft, quiet, and warm enough to melt the ice inside you. But when the ice melts, the water flows, and with it come old fears, forgotten memories, and buried pain. So if you've ever felt panic when true love approached, know this: it wasn't a mistake. It was a sign that something deep inside you is being summoned to transform. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, have you ever sabotaged a healthy relationship because it felt uncertain? Have you ever pulled away from someone simply because they were too kind? Have you ever felt anxious when things were too calm? If you answered yes, you are not alone. Jung believed that our souls don't just long for love, they long to feel worthy of that love. And to stand fully in love, we must first learn to stand fully in peace, something many of us were never taught. So I invite you to reflect and share in the comments, when I loved the right person, what scared me the most? Your words could help someone else face their own fear, because naming the fear is the first step to healing it. You don't have to fix yourself to love the right person, but you do need to understand yourself so you don't lose them to parts of you that haven't yet been embraced. In the next part, we'll explore the final stage of loving the right person, not when you're searching for someone to fill the emptiness inside, but when you begin to show up whole and awake within the relationship. Together, we'll uncover how to keep your sense of self in a deep relationship, how love doesn't turn into dependency, and how love can become a place for spiritual evolution, not just a place to settle. Stay with me, because what comes next is the map to help love not just survive, but bloom in your highest consciousness. What if I told you this? The very thing that keeps you from real love is not the other person, but the part of you that still doesn't believe you deserve it. Carl Jung once wrote, "You can't meet another person any deeper than you've met yourself." And this is the final gate, where love is no longer about asking who is right, but instead, am I brave enough to show up fully in love? We live in a world that reduces love to negotiation, compromise, and marketplaces. But Jung saw love as something far more sacred, a dissolving of the ego, where masks fall, where strategy ceases, where you dare to stay, even when every wounded part of you begins to rise. Imagine a woman named Laura. She once loved a man who made her feel like she was living in a romance film, intense, dramatic, passionate. But after every argument, she felt hollow and small. Then she met Daniel. He wasn't movie star handsome. He didn't recite poetry or sweep her off her feet. But Daniel stayed. When Laura was lost, he didn't react with frustration. He met her chaos with eyes that seemed to say, "This is not about me. She's wrestling with something deeper." And for the first time in her life, Laura felt safe. And then she panicked. She wanted to pull away. She began creating distance, looking for reasons to leave. Not because Daniel had done anything wrong, but because healthy love challenged the part of her that was used to chaos. Jung would say it wasn't Daniel she feared losing, it was the old self she was afraid of outgrowing. You see, real love is not where you blend in or sacrifice yourself. It's where you evolve. And that evolution can feel lonely because no one can do your inner work for you. They can only walk beside you as you enter the deepest terrain of your own being. Pause with me and ask, in your current or past relationship, did you trust that their love for you was real? Have you ever self-sabotaged something good because you didn't feel enough to keep it? Have you ever felt suspicious of peace and more alive in emotional chaos? If yes, you are not alone. Millions of us are waking up, realizing that true love doesn't come to perfect us, but to break the shell of who we thought we had to be, so that we may finally return to who we truly are. When you begin to love consciously, you'll notice subtle, powerful shifts. You can say, "I need space," without fearing abandonment. You can cry without shame. You stop chasing validation because you've begun validating yourself. Real love doesn't make you lose yourself, it brings you home to yourself. So I invite you to pause and write in the comments, in a healthy love, what have I learned about myself? We are building a community here not to show off perfect relationships, but to honor the moments we were brave enough to stay with the truth. Write your words as if someone out there lost like you once were might find their reflection in your voice, because maybe you are the light they've been waiting for. And now we step into the final frontier of Jungian love. How can love become a path of spiritual awakening? A sacred mirror not just of companionship, but of individuation. Well, explore Anima and Animus, the inner soul opposites in each of us, and how a true partner reflects triggers and ultimately helps you integrate them at the deepest level. So if you're ready for love that doesn't just bring you joy, but calls you back to your soul's purpose. Stay tuned for the final chapter. Because love was never the destination, it is the sacred ritual that brings you fully home. Jung called this the meeting point between the ego and the unconscious, where the person you love stops being just a partner and becomes a mirror reflecting your soul. According to Jung, every man carries within him an image of the anima, the inner feminine, a soul force that embodies intuition, emotion, and the depths of the unconscious. And every woman carries the animus, the inner masculine, the archetype of reason, structure, and action. When you love deeply, you're not just loving them. You're loving the part of your soul they awaken. Picture Eric, a man who built his life on logic. He runs a business. He trusts spreadsheets over sensations. He controls everything with plans. Then he meets Sophia. She doesn't fit any mold. She laughs for no reason, dances alone under the moonlight, and asks questions that don't need answers. Eric doesn't understand Sophia, but he's drawn to her. Not for her looks, but because she touches the dreamer, the soft one, the intuitive child, parts of himself he long buried. Sophia is the embodiment of Eric's anima. And when he loves her, he's not just loving a woman, he's unlocking a realm within himself that was once off limits. And in return, Sophia, deeply intuitive, flowing, and emotionalist, pulled toward Eric. Not because he's logical, but because he represents her animus, her inner order, her forgotten fire, her directional force. Their love is not just compatibility, it is a sacred initiation, an inner alchemical union. Jung believed only when anima and animus begin to dialogue within the psyche can we truly mature in love. But this is where the real work begins. When someone awakens your soul, the ego begins to tremble. You become softer, more vulnerable, more afraid. Not because they're hurting you, but because they're revealing the parts you've hidden. One woman once said, "I loved a man who made me realize how controlling it'd become. He never said it out loud, but the freedom in how he lived made me see how tightly I'd been holding on to myself, and it terrified me." You see, true love isn't about comfort. It's where you shed the armor and step into the wild, unpredictable terrain of soul integration. If you find yourself in a relationship where you feel both love and fear, pause and ask, what part of me is this person awakening that I've long rejected? Am I resisting theme or the soul within me they're trying to bring alive? Do I dare let this love pull me deeper instead of trying to make it easier? If your answer is yes, then you are living love as Jung defined it, not as a destination, but as the threshold of inner awakening. I invite you to join a growing circle, a community of seekers who are not just learning to love others, but learning to love themselves through others. In the comments, share, what have I learned about my soul through the one I love? By writing this, you're giving voice to the sacred experience others may not yet know how to name. And in a world this chaotic, your honesty is a form of collective healing. In the next chapter, we enter the final stage of transformation. How to distinguish sacred love from emotional attachment. How to initiate dialogue with your inner anima or animus. And how to keep love alive, not as a routine, but as a living path of spiritual awakening. If love has ever felt too big to explain, the next chapter won't just give you clarity. It will give you a doorway back to your truest self. Stay with me because we're not just learning to love. We are learning to live deeply.